Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are one day away from the 2024 election, and we already do have almost 80 million early votes cast. Now, I would imagine the turnout is probably going to be another record high based off of this early voting number. However, there has been a higher emphasis, especially on the Republican side of doing the early voting. The Democrats, maybe not so much considering 2020 and the pandemic and everything that happened, but 76 million. That's basically half of what we saw in terms of 2020, the overall turnout there. I think there's a few reasons we keep going up. The age of the internet, Donald Trump, there's a lot of people motivated to vote for him, vote against him. But let's take a look at this. You can see 41% Democrats, 39% Republicans. That is party registration. That doesn't guarantee Kamala Harris is at 41 and Trump's at 39. But we can surmise that 95+% of Democrats are going to be voting for Kamala. 95+% of Republicans are going to be voting for Trump. That's just the reality. And then you do have the other at 20%, which is very important, doing a lot of heavy lifting because you've got 41 to 39 to 20. And that's what it's going to come down to when you're talking about the independents. But when you look at this state by state, now there are some certain states where Republicans, maybe they're older, they just do more early voting. So that doesn't necessarily mean that if Republicans lead a state, a swing state like in Arizona, that's necessarily going to be a huge win for them. However, if you look at Arizona right now, you do see Donald Trump having a very, very nice lead right now when you talk about the early vote. And you can see around 2 million votes requested overall. Donald Trump up by around 9%, 42 to 33, with 25% as third party. Now, normally the third party or the other, they do vote slightly more Democrat when it comes to Arizona, but this is obviously a significant upgrade from 2016 and where the early voting was in Arizona. So I would expect Donald Trump to not win the state by 9 points. I know it's like a role reversal. We always think, well, if Trump's doing this well in terms of the early voting, think about the day of voting, but you also have that 25% that we're not accounting for. Probably a lot of those people are going to be voting for Harris, but that's not to say that she's going to be able to make that up. We don't think she is. Right now, Trump's up 9 in Arizona. That is very, very, very good news. You will take that. But this is, again, with the early voting. Just because he's up by 9 right now, it doesn't mean that he's going to win by even over 9 because, again, these 25% are very important that are right now unaccounted for. We can understand that a lot of the 33% that are registered Democrats are going to vote Democrat. A lot of the 42% of registered Republicans are going to vote Republican, but you can also see the breakdown in terms of gender. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and look at just the overall map in terms of women versus men and kind of explain that. But you can see 5% advantage for women when it comes to the early vote, which is pretty good when you talk about just early vote in general and how much women normally vote more early than men. But there is that. And then moving back, and I am going to quickly take a look at it because you can adjust this for gender. And you can see this is the divide that people are talking about. And a lot of Republicans are ringing the alarm bells about. You've got 53% women, 44% men. That's a 9-point advantage for women over men right now. And what I would say to this is that it's kind of a double whammy. When it comes to elections, women normally always outnumber men, and it's always because of minority women over minority men. White men actually vote more than white women by about 3%. But this 53 to 44 doesn't surprise me because white women, or excuse me, just on average, women vote more than men. And on top of that, they do early voting more than men. So it's like a double whammy, but it's not at 9%. You're going to see that gap closed for sure when it comes to the day of results and the day of voting. There's going to be more men voting day of. This right here is why there was a lot of alarm bells that were rung. However, I understand why they're doing it. Republicans doing the fear mongering. You got to get people to the polls. I get it. But this is not shocking data. It's not like if this was, 60% to 35, it'd be crazy. But this doesn't surprise me. Men very likely will make up ground. They're not going to pass women in terms of, or we wouldn't expect it just based off of past elections. But they're going to close it to the point where I don't think it's going to be a crazy reason why Trump would lose this election. So 53 to 44, we will see what ends up happening in terms of the day of vote. But there are a lot of votes cast, but there's still so many more day of votes that are going to be coming in. But that's just the reality when it comes to that. Looking at another state, well, you can see this is just the breakdown, men versus women. Obviously in Pennsylvania, plus 13 women. Trump's going to have to make up ground on that. Plus 10 in Michigan. You do have plus 7 in Wisconsin. But let's just go back to the party registration. Right now, things are looking very, very nice for Donald Trump in Florida. You can see Republicans at 44%, Democrats at 33%. That's an 11-point advantage. You've got others sitting at 23%. Do we really, like, obviously Donald Trump is winning the state. These numbers would not be here in terms of the early vote in Florida if this state was some type of swing state. I know liberals were trying to make the argument about a month ago that Florida could potentially be won by them, but they've really stopped. And I would imagine this is probably going to be at least a 9 to a 10 point win in Florida for Donald Trump. The numbers plus 11 is really good. But again, you're talking about limited data here. There's still so many more ballots left to cast, and you do have this 23% here. So I would say about a 10 to 11 point win, but it is a very nice indicator to see Trump up. Ohio, it's very impressive. Trump sitting up by 10 in Ohio in the early vote. There's still a lot of more votes out, but there's only 10% other. So yeah, Republicans up 50 to 40. I could see around a 9 to a 10 point win for Donald Trump in Ohio, which would signal a clear Bernie Moreno victory. And when it comes to Pennsylvania, which is the most important swing state right now, Democrats do have a big advantage. However, their firewall has been significantly cut. And so this is what we expected. Democrats were going to win the early vote in Pennsylvania by a ton, but they had a 1.1, and this is what Elon Musk talks about, a 1.1 vote advantage in 2020. It's been cut to about 390K. So it has been cut significantly, meaning that they were going into election night in 2020 just with the early voting up by 1.1 million in terms of based on party registration. Now it's only 390K. Now, that doesn't mean 1,000% that Trump's going to win, because there could be and there will be more day of Democrat voters, but it would be a lot to make up, we would say. That's what I would say. But Pennsylvania's going to be very close. We can't sit here and say for sure, because Republicans made up that much ground in terms of the early voting, where they were losing by 1.1 million. They only ended up going into election night. They only ended up losing the election in Pennsylvania by 80K. Now that they're only losing by 390,000, they're going to easily be able to make up that 80K. And I think they will. But I'm just saying there's other things that you have to take into account when it comes to that. But this is good numbers. You will take this in Pennsylvania. I know it looks bad, 57 to 33. But in comparison to what it was in 2020, this is significantly better than what we're seeing in Pennsylvania. A lot of this is comparisons to 2020, but the comparisons to 2020 are very hard to make because we knew Republicans were going to do better. You look at Michigan, I think these are pretty good numbers for Republicans. They're losing the early vote in Michigan, but only by 3. You do have 11% with the other, and we'll have to see how those people go. But in Michigan, I don't think that's bad at all. Taking a look at Wisconsin right now, 40 to 34. So Republicans down 6. That's something that you can make up for sure on election night in terms of the day of voting. New Hampshire, there's a lot of independents in New Hampshire. You're looking at 37 to 33. That's a 4-point Democrat advantage. But New Hampshire is a state that we're watching in terms of that. Taking a look at North Carolina, you've got other sitting at 35%, Republicans 33. So Republicans are outnumbering Democrats by 1 in terms of the early vote, but it's going to come down to that other third party affiliation, or some people that aren't affiliating with either party. Georgia Republicans sitting up 3 in terms of the early vote. That's very, very good news when you look at that. Georgia looks really good. I would say North Carolina looks solid. Arizona looks really good. This is pretty much what we expected. You take a look at Nevada. The early vote's been great in Nevada. That's part of the reason why the odds have moved on Nevada to where it's a slight Trump favorite now. You see Republicans sitting +4 over Democrats, and then the other at 28%. So there's another good sign in Nevada. This is like a Rust Belt election. If Trump can take the Sun Belt, you only need 1, or you don't even need a Rust Belt state if you can take a New Hampshire, where Republicans are only trailing by 4 right now. That's not to say they're going to lose by 4. There's a lot more data that goes into it. There's day of votes. There's the amount of people that are not registered with a party. You've also do have Virginia right now. Democrats sitting +11. Virginia is a state that Trump is certainly trying to flip, although he only did 1 rally there, so we'll see in Salem. But Democrats right now +11 there. But those are pretty much, if you take a look, I think you can filter for battleground states. So they have the 7 battleground states. Democrats +3, Democrats +6, Democrats +24, Republicans +1, well, I accidentally clicked that. Republicans +3, Republicans +4, Republicans +9. So the Republicans are putting up a significant better of a fight in terms of the early vote. There's no doubt about it. The gender is what's going to have to be made up when it comes to these states. And I think it will. I think a lot of it's fear-mongering because Republicans and the influencers are trying to get people out to vote, which is understandable, right? But this is not something that's peculiar. This is what we kind of expected. There was going to be more women than men voting in these elections in general. And on top of that, you were going to see more men vote day of, where women do more early voting. So, and also another thing we'll see, and that's not showing up here because they don't have it in terms of, the demographics, we are seeing a lower number in terms of early voting of minorities, which is a bullish sign for Donald Trump, and especially in Georgia. So, I think Georgia looks very good right now. I think Arizona looks good. I think North Carolina looks good. To me, this is going to come down to Pennsylvania. And you don't want to sit there because I've seen a lot of people predict a split Rust Belt. I don't have it split. I have Trump winning all three. But it could be a thing where Trump wins Pennsylvania but loses the other two, or Trump wins Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and loses Michigan. I mean, that could happen. But they're all just so close right now in terms of polling. That's why you're seeing people split them. But overall, I would say when it comes to this early voting, people always ask me about early voting. It happens all the time. When I do the live streams, and it's just like there's so much data that we don't know. I can't say, well, for sure Trump's going to win this state based off the early voting. It looks decent, but it's day of turnout. That's what matters. And liberals are happy because of the amount of women, but we knew there was going to be more women doing the early voting than men. So it's like when you have to put all this stuff into context. And so, listen, the early vote stuff checks out for a Trump victory, absolutely, but it's not something to where I can say, oh, it's definitely over. I know there's been people that say the morning of the election we'll know if Trump won or not, and it's based off of the turnout that we're hearing in the key swing states, like a Pennsylvania, for example. If there's record turnout in Pennsylvania and Republicans have cut into their firewall by like 600K, that's a pretty good sign for Republicans. Democrats are going to try and argue, well, no, it's Democrats who are doing more day of voting than early voting, and we're going to have this back and forth. Let's just get to the election, and that's really the hope. So, right now it checks out, I would say. I'm surprised the amount of mail-in and early votes. I think when it comes to this early voting, I think mail-in needs to be gone. Unless, you have an exemption or something, then obviously you should be able to mail it in. But most of these people that are doing mail-in, they don't want to go to the polls. And it's one of those things where, they've banned mail-in so many countries because of the fraud. It would be better to add another safeguard. You've got many people in this country that don't trust our elections. Let's do some things like other countries in Europe have done to where you could still have the in-person early voting, but the mail-in voting goes away and it's just in-person early voting, and do it like that. So that would be the next step for that, and obviously voter ID and all of that. But I'm just saying in general, because this is 76 million. I mean, this is basically half of the country already voted. I don't know if it's actually going to be half, because I do think we're going to break a record, and both candidates could get around 80 million, so it might be a little bit less than half. But if we get another update here, maybe it is going to be over half in terms of early voting, because people were asking me, they were like, is there going to be more day of vote? And I'm like, yes. Well, maybe not. I mean, I didn't know there were 76 million votes that were already cast. And these numbers, again, normally, you look at it right now, Democrats winning the popular vote by 2. That other is very important. The 20% is extremely important. And listen, this is what it is. If Democrats did win the popular vote by 2, if Kamala won the popular vote by 2, we'd be looking at an extremely close election. That I would say there's about a 60% chance, 70% chance Trump wins. If Harris wins the popular vote by 2, other people will be more aggressive with it and say, well, there's a 90% chance. That's because they're basing it off of the 2020 electorate. It's different. Trump's going to make up ground in terms of the popular vote in many of these liberal states. He's not going to take the electoral votes, but he's going to make a popular vote ground, making the election more condensed, making it closer while not gaining any electoral votes. That's why it's going to be different. And that's why I say if Harris wins by 2, it's not a lock that Trump would win. In 2020, it would be a lock, yes, but this is just different in terms of the way the votes are, Republicans are going to pick up votes in terms of the popular vote in liberal states, and the swing states are still going to be very close. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Links to that's always in the description.